702.
The Clement Manyathela Show.
Let's walk the talk.
17 minutes before 11 o'clock. So we continue with the series that we started about, 2 weeks ago? Looking at the things that science cannot explain. We first looked at witchcraft. Last week we discussed manifestation. Today we're discussing the soul and the spirit. Because whether you're religious or not, you probably have used the terms interchangeably. Most people believe they have some form of a soul, whether loosely believe in this concept of the human spirit or they believe part of them will live on when their body expires. These are the beliefs that are out there about the body, the spirit, and the soul, and they all come from somewhere. I mean, traditionally, the terms soul and spirit derive their meaning from religious beliefs, right? So today, in this largely scientific world, people still use soul and spirit to express the deepest parts of human experience. And I have invited now Gogo Dineo Ndlanzi, who is an African spiritual healer and teacher, to help us understand where the differences are and how these two terms form part of this human experience. Gogo Ndlanzi, thank you so much for making time for us. Good morning.
Hey, morning, Clement. Thank you so much for having me.
Many people use the words soul and spirit interchangeably. Do they mean the same thing or are they slightly different?
They mean different things of being, right? So human beings are multidimensional. So they are the physical, the intellectual, and they're the spiritual and the soul. So science would coin the soul as the seat of your personality, your emotions, and your memories, therefore calling it the nervous system. And in spirituality, we call it the soul because it doesn't only carry memories of your childhood, but it also carries the memories of the lives you might have lived before this lifetime. It carries the memories of your ancestors. It carries the memories of the generational traumas, the generational things the generational gifts that have been passed on from one generation to the other, whereas spirit is the spark of life. Spirit is breath. Spirit is the God essence of a human being. That's the purest form of who you are. That is spirit.
So everything good about me then is the spirit.
Everything pure about
you.
Okay. Pure about you, your pure essence, you. So I was listening to, what's currently happening, and I was a little bit triggered. And I was like, where is the spirit? Because the soul is an interceder between the desires of the flesh and the calling of the spirit. So when people, they have a dark soul or their soul is dead, this is where people can, commit heinous acts. This is where they commit the acts of just looting. From Tembi's hospital, the things that you just spoke about, these are people whose souls are darkened because the soul must be able to hear the guidance of the spirit, that this is immoral, this is unjust, this is criminal, this is wicked. But when somebody's soul is weakened, they can't hear spirit louder, because as expressions of God, we are still given sovereignty. We still have free will to act according to what we want, but free will cannot be harmful to those around us. It can be harmful to animals. It can be harmful to other human beings. We are still held accountable. Our souls will still be held accountable for the acts that we commit, even though we are granted free will.
Yeah, and if we're being honest, Gogo Ndlanzi, there are many instances where many of us are still confronted with that choice to do good or bad. And when you do bad, whether it's you paying that small little bribe, but you're thinking, oh, I feel bad about this, but those are also the moments, even in those you could call insignificant moments where the voice is there that this is not a good thing, don't do this. But sometimes we tend to suppress that. How do we take care then of the soul and the spirit? Because when we talk about the human experience, we focus so much on the physical, the bodily experience. And as you said, science will tell you about the personalities, but I don't think we speak a lot about how do you then keep clean and also just strengthen that soul and that spirit. How do we do that?
Yeah. I think we must be clear that personality is not who you are. Personality is who you learned to be to survive. Yes, it's not who you are. So a lot of people think they are their personality, you more than your personality. So things have happened to us. So let's speak about the things that weaken our souls. Trauma, traumatic experiences, witchcraft, for example, when you are continuously getting attacks on your life that will weaken your soul, right? The spirit cannot be touched. That's God. Nobody can touch that higher frequency, but people can touch the soul. Tragedies that we experience, grief that we experience. So those things do affect the soul and weaken the soul. And even when the soul is communicating what the spirit is talking, it doesn't hear louder because you are in grief. It doesn't hear louder because you've been abandoned. It doesn't hear louder because you've been rejected. And like you said, it starts with the small acts of not good, right? It starts with the small acts of what we would call sin in a religious term, but sin means misalignment. So when you misalign, if you don't go back into aligning requires healing. Aligning requires presence and grounding work. How do I pay attention to my breath? My breath reminds me of my body. My body reminds me that I can feel. Then when I can feel, I'm sad. I feel sad. I'm feeling this. I'm feeling those things, So we think people just become, evil, but evil is bred by society. That's why in African spirituality, when somebody does an evil deed, it's a reflection of the society that they come from. So we would have to review what our customs, what our culture, what have we not done to really create an environment where the soul can thrive. Where is the village? What went wrong with the village that raised this child that became a monster who's now a serial rapist?
So how do you know then that your soul is thriving?
How one knows that their soul is thriving, one is that you feel content. A lot of us are not. We live our lives. We can have check boxes of everything, but there's no contentment. Peace is not cultivated from what you attain or achieve, but peace is being comfortable with who you are. We know that your soul is content when you don't have to apologize for being yourself, where you can authentically and truthfully live your life, where it's the sunrise is the most beautiful thing where one can experience. And how do we know that somebody is not content? Is when they're always in the chasing, when it's the next car and the next latest phone and all of that. So we know that there's a misalignment there, and these are the things that lead people to committing, crazy things on earth. But we live in a society of consumerism. We don't live in a society where we celebrate people just being alive, just you are enough as you are, breathing. We no longer have places of communion. I mean, with the modern life, everything is so fast, but we don't sit around the table and eat together, pray together, check in with each other. How is your heart? How have you been? Not how are you? I'm fine, of course, everyone would say that, but how have you been? How is your heart? We don't wake up and check in with ourselves. When we wake up, the alarm goes off, we're out of bed, we are onto our phone to check our to-do list, but you don't check with your body, because when you are sleeping and when you are at rest, your spirit is awake, so it travels right into realms, and then when it returns, the soul must recall those experiences. So some of the experiences are tragic, some of those experiences are horrible, as the things that your soul did in the past that it must clear in this lifetime. So therefore what happens is, as the soul reminds the body, there is a disconnect or a trauma that happens. So can you imagine when you get up with that, you have not fully landed, your spirit and soul has not fully landed into the body when your body was at rest. So then you go out of the car and then boo, you find yourself into a car accident, and it becomes a series of misfortune. And sometimes it's things that life is happening at us, but life is happening with us. So it's important for people to have their own grounding practices. When you're not feeling okay, it's not just speaking that I'm not okay. Can you pay attention? But can you journal? Can you take a moment to breathe instead of rushing to the next appointment, to the next thing that is waiting for you?
Yeah, Chad on the WhatsApp line says, Clement, I often wonder where my soul exists other than this realm, where I was before, and where will I go after I die? I think our dreams are places our souls visit while our bodies rest. That's a message there from Chad. So is the soul or spirit something that belongs solely to an individual, or is it always tied to a family or ancestry as well?
So as as souls, we choose families to be born into. So before you are born, you are sitting somewhere in the spirit realm, and then there's a contract you enter into. That contract is, what am I here to fulfill? And what do I need to fulfill my obligations? So you choose your parents, you choose your environment. That does not excuse the misfortune you experience as a child. It doesn't excuse child abuse. It does not excuse those things, but you chose some of these experiences as a way to awaken the soul to why it has come on earth, why it chose to incarnate. So as to your point of what was on WhatsApp, when we depart, right, we experience what we call two deaths. The first death is the physical. The body dies, but the soul is still alive. Then the soul must also go through a death. But before the soul goes through a death, the soul is played its life. So, soul, watch what you have lived. Look at what you've done. Look at the bribe you gave that person, and look at what the bribe led to. Look at all of those things, and the soul must then account. The spirit does not die. Kemoya. That does not die. It just transforms. It returns back to source. And source for other people, kemudimu, unkulunkulu, others is God, Allah. So whoever whom source is, the divine that creates, that we as the humans are co-creators of.
So
Yeah.
how do people then keep the soul and spirit aligned and healthy?
So one is that the spirit, remember, it's healthy as it is. Your spirit is pure, is healthy. But how do you keep your soul in tune with the spirit so that it's not misled by the desires of the flesh? It's the X, like I said. That's where religion comes. Remember, religion is an organized form of worship. It's organized, it's structured, but religion requires spirituality. And the beauty of spirituality, it says there are many forms of connecting. There are many forms of grounding. For you, Clement, one of the ways that grounds you is to get on the road, right? It reminds you of breath. It reminds you of the essence of you. You appreciate that you are alive because you are constantly having to recognize and meet your breath. For somebody else's meditation, right? For somebody else is writing things down. For somebody else is actually sitting and enjoying a meal. So there are various acts where we can look into that can ground us. Can you be in tune? What are your values and principles? Because once you are clear on your values and principles, these would be guiding posts on how not to fall off the wagon, how not to sin, how not to misalign, right? Are we clear why we are here? A lot of us just survive. We're not living life. And that's why we're not thriving. And that's why we'll keep on chasing. And that's where we start to misalign, because you are finding yourself in everything because you don't know who you are outside your personality of I am loud, I am talkative, I am intelligent. Some of these personality traits are what we needed to get or learn to survive traumatic experiences we've encountered as children.
Yeah.
Somebody says, I speak like this, I'm loud like this, I get easily angered. That is your survivor. That's the shadow that you needed to build to survive. Otherwise, you've not pulled through those experiences,
Sure. So, in African traditional healing, certain illnesses are said to be caused not just by the body being sick, but by maybe the soul being grieved, or maybe, I don't know, spirit being disturbed. And in fact, it's not just in African traditional healing, because I've read a book about medical intuition, like Carolyn Miss, who's written a book, The Anatomy of the Spirit, also speaks about this. So is it possible that some of the illnesses we face may be as a result of the soul or spirit, or soul is harmed? I don't know if, as you said, the spirit is your purest form, if that can be harmed or weakened too. Is that a possibility?
Spirit cannot be. Yeah, there is. So remember, spirit, we kept it as life force, breath, God in you. Then soul does get harmed, and we spoke about the things that weaken the soul. So things like trauma, for example, would weaken the soul. And it's not only, that's why in African spirituality you hear things that the ancestors are asking. Remember, the soul is connected. It's the memory box. It's where your akashic records of the lives you have lived with other families and other lineages, including this lifetime, but also where you've kept your childhood memories. So when we go through trauma, we go through what we call the 4 Fs, right? F's, flight, fight, fawn, and freeze. So when we have been through intense trauma where we shut down our human brain, we shut down our animal brain, which is to run and either fight through, we get into the reptilian brain. So in spirituality, we call it a miasma. So there's people who have what we call frozen traumas. And it's not only traumas that they've experienced in this lifetime, it could be past lifetime, but it's also traumas of their families, their mothers. Science has now proven that actually children are born with part of their mother's nervous system, which is the soul, because children in their mother's womb hear and feel everything. So when your mother was going through a stressful situation, when your mother was going through an intense situation, and maybe that's why the generation of the 80s and the 90s and even my 2000, there's so much happening with us because we as South Africans were going through major transition, and that major transition came at a lot of bloodshed. So we think, I was born in 81, for example. I mean, that time there was a lot of turmoil. So what was my mother feeling? So part of that is encoded in me. I'm born with it. So that's why people will go through certain illnesses and ailments, but they can't place them somewhere in the medical because it is a soul illness. It's a passed on trauma onto your body that you are carrying.
Sure. Gogo Dineo Ndlanzi, thank you so much. Always so insightful chatting to you. Really appreciate it. She's an African spiritual healer and teacher talking to us about the spirit and soul. That's part of our series looking at things that science can't really explain. It's 11 o'clock.
Saddle up for springtime success with Hollywood Bears. Experience
Hanging out with Clement
on
702.
Let's walk the talk.